Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw, and that would be the WWE Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco, and we got the hardcore legend himself, Mr. ECW champion. He's been booking everything all over the world, one of the best guys in the business, one of the smartest guys in the business, Mr. Tommy Dreamer. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor. And if you really think about it, back in 1997, I met the both of you at the same time.
That's right, you did.
In an auspicious debut, but I thought we were going to actually fight. But that's a whole other story that we can tell here.
I didn't know what you was talking about until you said, well, we thought we were going to fight. Then the light bulb went off. And Tommy, other than that one meeting that we had there, and I've always respected you. I've always thought you were a top class guy, man. I enjoyed working with you through our stay at WWE. And John and I having this show on, we get to talk to old friends, and we your name come up, and we both said, why not, man? Tommy's a great guy. We both enjoyed his company. So welcome to the show. Welcome to Storied, man. Let's have a good time today and laugh, tell some funny old road stories. I'm sure you got a million ECW stories that's never been told before. So we're looking forward to hearing some of those.
You got it. You guys trigger my memory, and we'll just go. I love it, and thank you for having me. It's
now,
great.
Mr. Brisco, all that being said, that first night you wanted to fight him.
I was so mad that when I got the back, I was going to beat the fuck out. Excuse me for saying I don't usually use those words, but that's how mad I was. I was going to beat the what out of Bruce Pritchard. And he started that chubby cheeks of his started kind of shaking. And I said, how can I beat up a guy with chubby cheeks like that? It looks like a girl baby.
When we talk about how the business has changed, we all met at Raven's place. He had a place right on South Street, and none of us were smart in the sense of we're listening to Paul, and Paul says Vince knows, and we're just going to run with it. And none of the boys know and any of this stuff. And we're like, okay. We also had what I would like to deem as snipers in the building, where we had the Dudleys, we had the Eliminators, because here's me and Salmon.
Who are the Eliminators? I'm sorry.
Perry Saturn and John Cronus. John is no longer with us. Perry, as you know. And we had other wrestlers stationed through the crowd in case a real fight breaks out. And I'm going into enemy territory and me and Raven's like, it's got to be a work. It's got to be a work. They have to know. And I'm like, I don't know, man. So I'm with Sandman and Paul. Sandman would fight. Paul, I know, will just get in my way if I'm fighting. But we're like, hey, this has to, but just going in there totally blind, not knowing what's going on. And I remember we did it. The whole place is popping. The first time I ever really meet John, he walks by me. And I've seen this look when he was drinking later on when we became friends. He gets the T-Rex look where he starts to bend over and he gives a look at me, and, we're playing it up, and Dutch is giving us a look like, what are you doing? And then when everything goes down, I remember you, Mr. Brisco, like it was yesterday. I saw rage and hatred in your eyes, and, I'm working and I'm like, whoa, this is real. And I hear under your breath, you go, you motherfucker, I'll fucking kill you. And I'm like, in my head, how am I going to fight Jerry Brisco right now? And I was just, I watched this man at, Starrcade, all these great events. And I'm just like, what world am I currently living in where this is as real can get? And you were ready. You would have killed me, Paulie, and Salmon in a heartbeat. You had such rage and hatred in your eyes.
And no offense, but any sniper was set down there, he didn't have a chance.
I know. Trust me.
Jerry, when did you get smartened up? You didn't get smart enough till you went out there, right?
I didn't get smart enough until I was headed over the barricade, and Bruce grabbed me by the back of my pants. I don't know who I was going after. Was it you, Tom? I don't know who.
You had pure hatred for my.
I was headed over I had one leg over the damn barricade, and Bruce grabbed the back of my pants and shouted, "It's a work." And by then, I just lost all my aggression toward the people in front of me, and it immediately turned to that that a-hole behind me. Grab him.
He's getting
And
hot already.
on the way out, man, he's trying to pat me on the back, and you know how Bruce would be jovial about it. And when we got through those curtains, I said, Bruce, you're lucky I'm your friggin' friend, because I'm going to fucking kill you.
Fired up.
About that time, 3 or 4 people kind of got in between, because they knew I was hot, man, and you were too, John. I mean,
I was, but what most people don't know, and I told us when Bubba's on here, was I got smartened up kinda right before I walked out. So Savio had been smartened up, and I saw Savio the day he was telling the story, and I didn't want to correct him because he was in front of people, because he doesn't know. Right before I walked out, Lanza pulls me aside and says, "Hey, if anything happens out there, don't overreact." And I said, "Jack, you're not going to tell me don't overreact to something that might happen unless something's going to happen." And Jack's sitting there with that cigarette, and he goes, "You heard me." And then that was it. So when the beer,
when you guys were coming from the dressing room, right, or from
No, he was in the match.
Yeah, that was coming right before I went out. So I don't know who went out first, whether it's Savio or me, but right before I went out, that's when Jack pulled me aside, because that was so stupid. Because why would you smarten up Savio and not smarten up me? You know, if you throw beer on Savio, the other guy's going to be the one that jumps in. And they told Savio, put a rope around my neck when it happens to keep me back. I'm like, that's so dumb to think, just smarten me up. Well, so I think that's what Lanza did. And I don't know if that was with the blessing events or if Jack just kind of did that as a favor or whatever. But when the beer got thrown on Savio, I guess Sandman spit the beer on Savio. Savio makes the move, and he turns right to me, puts a rope around my neck. He goes, "Easy, cowboy, let's go back in the ring." And I realized then that this is what was going to happen. And I knew at that point that this was all part of the show, because Jack had smartened me up. If Jack hadn't smartened me up, I think I'd have tried to get loose from Savio.
When we're sitting there, Paul leans over to Sandman and tells him, when the time is right, spit your beer at Savio. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what? And he goes, we're going to go as soon as Sandman spits his beer. And I'm, okay. But I mean, in the world where, especially with wrestling now, like it's just something that could never, ever happen again. It was just so insane, where you say, like, nobody knew.
That is insane. That number one, Tommy, that just don't happen. I mean, even in our day, I mean, something like that, it just didn't happen. You guys set it up, and it was perfect. I mean, without spending 8 hours the entire day of rehearsing it like they do, every bump that's taken nowadays, and back in those days too, we had to spend a lot of time rehearsing. We're not taking anything away from today's guys, because we did it too. We had to rehearse too. But the thing was just set up so perfectly and executed so well with you guys. I mean, in my mind, it was a survival night. I was going to survive. I don't know.
And I was too. I mean, if I hadn't been smartened up, win, lose, or draw, I'm going over the rail. Win, lose, or draw. You have to. You have no choice at that point.
I had one leg over the damn rail. That's how close I was before Bruce grabbed my back of my pants.
And years later, a wrestling company called XPW kind of tried to do the same thing. And during my match, and the entire locker room, including Paul, emptied out into the arena, into the crowd, and were fighting for real in the streets of Los Angeles, live on pay-per-view while my match is going on, because they tried to do something similar, and they paid the price for it. But
it was an awful lot at risk, when you do something like that, and you're hoping for the best, and fortunately, the timing just had to be just right on Bruce, keeping me, because I probably would have got trampled out there, because there's a bunch of you guys, and you guys were serious about it too. So it could have turned out, but you know what? It turned out great. Turned out to be something that we're still talking about today. 20 some odd years later, and the joke was on me from Bruce Pritchard, and I said that's one of the things I hate Bruce Pritchard about. One of the things.
That's all, Jerry. That's
one of the many things.
Jerry, for people that don't know, you and I are Bruce's only friends, and we're not good friends. So
no.
that's just one of quite a few things.
Hey, one of my favorite things that John used to always do, This was, I guess, Bruce's, I don't know what number run in the WWE, but when I was there, and Bruce would be like standing there doing something like, you know, if we're doing a pre-tape, and all of a sudden Bradshaw would interrupt it and go, Bruce, what do you do? Like, seriously, what do you do? And he's like, you know, well, what are you doing? And John would be like, no, I'm serious. Like, what do you do here? You're sometimes on creative. You're sometimes a producer. Like, what is your actual title? And like, he would just be Bruce and never get an answer, but John would do it all the time or bust whatever he was about to do.
And we still hadn't figured out what he does.
We didn't know what he knows, and he's still there making all kinds of money.
Yeah, he's back for his 18th run, and they still don't know what he does. I guess that's the reason he comes back so much, because hey, let's bring Bruce in. He was good at whatever it was that he did, you know.
Hey, you know, and just to finish that thought with the invasion, you know what stopped the boys was Lanza. You know, while Brisco and Pritchard were going to the arena, the boys were coming from the locker rooms. They were coming out.
Yeah.
And Lanza meets them at Gorilla and says it's a work. And they're still mad, but now they're not, okay, all right. Now they're just as mad at, like Jerry is, they're mad at who didn't smarten them up.
We also, if you go into an alternate universe, what if the boys made it out there and it would have just been the realest fight ever live, and we would have been outnumbered and got our ass kicked.
Well, you're outnumbered 50-10, probably.
Yeah, but Tommy, we might still have a job too. Look at Pritchard.
That's right.
And there's a question I got to ask you. Every guy we've had on here from the New York metropolitan area, was you at Madison Square Garden when Jimmy Snuka flew off the top of the cage?
In the greatest, I guess, spectacle of professional wrestling, myself, Bully Ray, Mick Foley, and Little Guido were all at the same show at the same time.
There you have it, Jerry. Everybody we ask about that show, they tell us they were there.
No, I'm telling you, it's me, Mick, Bubba, and Guido were the 4 guys to make it in wrestling that I know that were there.
Did you guys know each other at the time?
No. Bubba was like a fat kid from Long Island. Guido was
was. What do you mean was?
Mr. Brisco. Bully is lean.
I know it. He'll kick my ass. I love Bully. We had Bully on for 2 hours.
Bully looks incredible right now. I mean, he looks incredible right now.
To quote your friend Bruce Pritchard, one of the greatest things he ever said was, "I could deal with the reformed drug addicts. I could deal with the wrestlers who found God. I can deal with the reformed alcoholics, but there's nothing worse than a fat guy who's gotten himself in shape, because they'll tell you how to eat, what to do, how to live their life,
and what they weigh hourly."
Yeah.
Bruce was the same way. We went on that water diet, you know. I think it was whose brother was it that had all those pills in Philly that he was pushing, you know, the dietary. It was Mosh or one of the headbangers. Had a brother that was in the nutrition real bit.
Yeah,
so he got us on all these water
Jerry, there was a few pills pushed in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and they weren't always vitamins either. But mine was I lost.
Speaking of ECW.
I think Bruce lost about 65 pounds, and he got down really? He got down scary skinny. He would say, yeah, you carried around distilled water, a gallon, you drink 3 gallons of distilled water a day, and took about 60 pills 4 times a day. And I got down the lowest I'd been since college wrestling, you know, about 170 or something like that.
Ron and I were at some wrestling convention or something, and we run into Bubba, which we love Bubba. We're always glad to see him. So we sit there and talk to him. And when Bubba walks off, Ron goes, you know, he's on some good shit. He's rock hard right now. I mean, he's freaking got shoulders, his arms, there's not an ounce of fat on him.
And we have been having a fat battle. See, I'm one of the few guys to actually pull the vet card on Bully, because I got him into ECW. So, but in our entire wars where we have fat wars, you know, you're so fat all the time, I have never, ever weighed more than him. But I think we're approaching each other. He's probably around 289 to 285. And I had hit 300 not too long ago. And now I'm trying to get back down.
I saw Bubba one day, and I was walking somewhere around Fox, and I see you, Tommy, coming out of Dunkin' Donuts with a cup of coffee.
Of course.
So
At
I
random
gotta
in the
tell-
street, pre-pandemic, I'm walking to Doug, heading into Sirius, and I walk out. I got a bunch of donuts, not just for myself. And who to walk into? I hear, "Oh hell!" And it's John in the middle of the street of Manhattan, and I'm caught red-handed with a bunch of donuts and a coffee.
and I see Bubba, and I said, I saw Tommy coming out of Dunkin' Donuts, and I never finished the sentence. Bubba goes, he was what? Well, I think he was bringing donuts to everybody, but he goes, he was, huh? I just, never mind.
Walked into that one.
Yeah. So Tommy, after you were inspired by Jimmy Superfly Snuka's jump off the top of the cage, you and 50 other main eventers that main evented WrestleMania. How did you go about finally making that step into the world of professional wrestling?
Well, the guy who hooked me was my first ever time seeing wrestling was it was snowed out. The Ranger game was snowed out. They were playing the Canadians, and instead they showed wrestling from Madison Square Garden, and they showed Bob Backlund versus Bulldog Brower. And I was the biggest Bob Backlund fan. I never had seen wrestling before. I loved it. Long story short, I go to the county center for my 10th birthday. Bob Backlund snubs me for an autograph. I'm done with wrestling. And my father was a teacher. We go down to Hollywood, Florida, and we watched Florida Championship Wrestling from the old Hollywood Sportatorium. And Mr. Brisco, you were on that card. Years later, I went and researched it. They did a tournament, and it was you guys and the Funks and Dust. The main event was Dusty and Bugsy McGraw versus Ivan Koloff and Dick Murdoch. Dick had just turned on America, joined Russia. He'd be a massive heel today. And when I tell you, I can remember it like it was yesterday, the way the light hit Dusty's blonde hair and the gnats that were flying around, and Dream looked like he floated on Earth, and he was a god to me. And I watched that. I watched the match. I was frozen, and I've never been frozen before in my life. And then as soon as that match ended, I bought my first ever 8x10, which was Dusty holding the bloody bull rope. And then I bought a Barry Windham t-shirt, which was The Kid Was Hot Tonight. And driving home, I said, this is what I have to do in my life. And my father and mother were very, very supportive, bought me wrestling magazines. I was hooked ever since. And, the business was much different. Trying to research, there's no internet, there's no anything. The business was still very, very secretive. And then I went, again, a newspaper article was, hey, bodybuilders, tough guys, strong men, all this stuff. You want to be a pro wrestler, audition for a Captain Lou Albano movie, a life movie. So my father takes me down to the city, and Ned Beatty was there, who was supposed to play Captain Lou Albano, which is weird casting. Captain Lou is there, and I'm 17 years old, going to be 18. And I'm wearing a yellow tank top. I'm probably 185 pounds. I had sweatpants on that looked like the Fabulous One. They had lightning bolts. I got dressed to the hilt, cut the best, worst Hulk Hogan promo, ripped my tank top because you had to cut a promo to show if you had, speaking ability, which I just went. And then Captain Lou's like, all right, brother, you did good. And I turned right to Captain Lou Albano. And in this is my shot, I turn right to Lou Albano. I say, excuse me, Lou Albano, I know you're the manager of champions. Can you manage me? I'd really want to be a wrestler. Which now I think about that now, he was like, oh, what is this Mark talking about? But my insider logo in my head was how I'm in, because I called him the manager of champions, which years later, that was Grand Wizard's thing, not even Captain Lou. And then he goes, go see that guy. And that guy was Johnny Rodz. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's Johnny Rodz. I've seen Johnny wrestle forever. And then as I'm walking to go see Johnny, I see Rocky Johnson sleeping on the corner of the apron. And I'm like, oh my God, total like markdom. So no, I don't want to be trained by Johnny Rodz. I want to be trained by Rocky Johnson. Johnny did jobs. I want to get put over. I go to Rocky Johnson, who's borderline sleeping. And I go, excuse me, Mr. Johnson, I really want to be a wrestler. Do you have any advice to me? And he turns and he looks, he goes, you'll never make it, kid, and turns back around. And I'm like, why would you say that to me? Like, I was crushed. And then I went to Johnny. I was like, excuse me, Johnny, like, because now you're my third option in life here. And I said, hey, I'm very interested in wrestling. And he was with Damien Demento, Bill DeMott. And then he's like, he hands me his card and he goes, here, call me. And then I went, and on my 18th birthday, I started, going to wrestling school, and the rest was history. And I would go every Monday and Tuesday to Gleason's gym in Gleason in Brooklyn, New York. And Johnny trained me. And a lot of times, you look at your fundamentals and your foundation, but there's so many times in life where I'll just be like, man, Johnny was right. And Johnny was a machine. He was probably 45 to 48, and he would be in the ring with Damien Demento for about an hour, Bill DeMott for about 30, Taz for about 30, and then me for about 15, and never got out of that ring. And he never trained you to hurt you, but he would train you to teach you. Like if you got up the wrong way, he would push you down. Or if you had your hand out, he would step on your fingers. And his main thing was, if you get hurt, you're not going to be able to eat. You're not going to be able to feed your family. And I just think of like a lot of his lessons, how he was, or like teaching you strength. Because sometimes for a body slam, he would dead ass you. And he's like, this is where you need strength. This is where, because what if you can do if you're in the ring with a guy who's blown up, blah, 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 blah. So I think about, as you get older, you're reflective, but he was an amazing trainer for me. And then here came Devon, and he trained a lot of guys who were fortunate enough to make it in this industry.
Well, that's what's really strange. There's a lot of talk about different trainers in our business, and Johnny rarely gets brought up. But if you go over a Hall of Fame list of who's who in our business, hell, every one of them has crossed paths with Johnny in some way, especially all the Northeast guys up there. He's trained so many champions, so many. I don't think Johnny really gets the credit he deserves as being one of those elite trainers.
He was a machine, man. He
What
really did.
kind of facility did Johnny have?
It was Gleason's gym was a boxing gym.
That was the old boxing gym, right?
And you walked in there and it was not the glitz and glamour. It was, I was trained also in a boxing ring, which is dead centered, shitty ropes.
Hard, yeah.
Oh.
And well, I think it also, as calcifies your body. But I'm telling you, for like the first week, he's like, watch. So I watch. The next week, he's like, be a referee. You watch wrestling, be a referee. And he's purposely having the boys like bump in me. I'm trying to, and then by the third week, because I'm like, I'm doing nothing except sitting here for hours upon hours. And he's like, take a bump. And I'm like, what? And he's like, fall down. And when I did it, my head pounding, he goes, do another one. And he's like, all right, come back tomorrow. And I'm like, man, I gave this guy, like, what is he doing? And then when I came back the next day, he realized I wanted it. And now, like, after 3 weeks of literally just doing, and then he was just like, okay, so you've been here for 3 weeks. What'd you learn? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, now you're a dumbass because you think you know everything about wrestling. You know nothing. And then was beyond hands-on, always in the ring, always correcting you, and like also shooting on you, but not to injure you. But, hey, you leave your leg out there, I'm going to take it. Hey, you do this, you get up the wrong way, I'm going to bump on you. And those are all things that, again, man, I think about it. He was great, and having to deal with all these different personalities, a very, very intense Bill DeMott, a very, very angry Taz. I mean, the list goes on and on, having to deal with all these people, but trained you great. And he'll still say, even though Devon's a Hall of Famer, that I was his prize student. So get back, Devon.
The gym itself, Gleason's gym, we had Bill DeMott on, and unfortunately that show has never seen the light of day because I lost it somewhere on a computer. So hopefully we're going to have Bill on again if he forgives me. But he was telling us about Gleason's gym when you were there, and he mentioned Mitch Blood Green and Tyson. That happened right near there, right?
Oh yeah. Listen, I was Johnny would always call me.
And for those who don't know, I'm sorry. For those who don't know, Tyson runs into Mitch Blood Green and ends up popping him, and it was a big deal in boxing in the early 90s.
they got into a real fight, a street brawl, and then there was also an arena right under the Brooklyn Bridge. And if you ever watch the TV show Friends, that's where they're standing overlooking the scene of New York. And there was an arena underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, and Tyson had rented out the arena, and right down the block was the gym, and it was a badass boxing gym. So they asked us to kind of bodyguard Mike Tyson, because they're hearing that Mitch Blood Green is going to show up. And it's me, Damien Demento, who at the time looked like one of the Road Warriors, Bill DeMott, and Mitch Green shows up. And they were like, hey, hey, hey. And he opens his thing and he's got a firearm. And I literally see, and Johnny would always call me like rich boy. I grew up, in an upper middle class family. And here I am in a gym where people are trying to fight for their lives, trying to improve their lives to get out of, the ghettos, and trying to fight their men. And I'm an 18-year-old kid. And here's Mitch Blood Green. He pulls out a piece, and Damien Demento is like, I'm out. And then Bill walks away, and I'm standing there alone, and Green is just cutting promos. And I'm like, sir, I'm awestruck, because he wants to go in there and kill him. Over what, I don't know. It was a big
Did you
deal.
stop him before he came in? Is that what happened? Where's the confrontation with you guys?
It's in the street.
So it's the bodyguards guarding the baddest man on the planet, and you're out there with Mitch Blood Green, who's got a gun in his pants.
Yeah, and there was
Tyson's inside.
Yep.
Okay.
And we're out in the street, and then Bill and Damien kind of just walk away. I'm left there, and then other police came. New York City's finest came in, and it was quickly gone. But for those couple of maybe 35 to 50 seconds, it's pure mayhem. But he showed up, and like most of the times when you hear, oh, that guy's going to show up to kill him, they normally don't show up. But oh yeah, no, he showed up. He was ready to go for Mike again.
And then when did the fight happen? Was this after the fight had happened, or
this was after the fight had happened? This was the reason he was coming back for the second one.
Oh, I never heard that part of the story. So he came back he was going to kill Tyson.
That's what he was claiming.
And he had a gun. So, I mean, it was not like it was a total bluff.
I remember when Damien Demento, he literally put his hands up and went, okay, and just walked away. And I'm like, what are you doing?
The smartest guy out of the bunch.
Yeah.
Were you around when the fight happened, or
no?
You probably saw the aftermath, right?
No, I wasn't there for that. I probably ran in fear, John, to be honest. I'm not going to be this big macho guy. That was, like I said, I was an 18-year-old kid, never had experienced anything, like that. But yeah, it was a scary time. Bill had come in, and Mondo had come in before me. Mondo Clean was Damien Demento, but they had come in before me. Same with Taz.
Yeah, because apparently it was
one. No,
but it was a hell of a punch. I mean, that was when Tyson was knocking the world out with one punch.
Yeah,
that was Tyson with no glove.
Yep, they had a street fight. I think they had two actually, and then this was
really
supposed to be the rubber match
with the gun.
Yeah.
Gun on a pole.
Yeah, what are you carrying?
Did Johnny Rods have classes that you say he worked with the guys? Did he have classes that he was running, or was he working individual people?
He still has his school. I don't know the schedule. For me, it was Monday and Tuesday from probably 12 in the afternoon till closing, which sometimes was like 7 o'clock. I still, whenever I walk into those type of gyms, I hate the smell of the sweat and the spit. But because it brings me back to some, badass training. And I would go there. I was in college. I redid my entire schedule so I could make training. And I would be there from pretty much the moment it entered until the end of the day. Because this is, again, like I said, I've been hooked ever since I first, saw it. And I still, dude, I sadly watch way too much wrestling. I watch usually about a match a day, or if not more. I still go down that rabbit hole every single night. And whenever, as you guys know, this business is a very one-sided business at times. And if you ever get pissed or I never wanted to be the bitter veteran because everything I have in my life is because of wrestling and I love it. But if you ever get in those moments, I always go back and I watch stuff on Peacock that made me fall in love with it. And I go down, I watch everything in a row still. I'm currently in Mid-Atlantic, so I get to see Mr. Briscoe be the man. And I just do. I watch it because this is like, hey, this is why I'm still doing this. This is why I love it.
Jerry and I do a thing we call Best of the Best, where we watch matches each week and we'll do a watch along. We've had so much fun doing it. I mean, we went over the old O'Connor Rogers match, the Don Eagle, Gorgeous George Screwjob. This week was Tiger Jeet Singh and Terry Funk in the death match tournament in FMW in Japan. But it's so fun to go back and watch those matches and, look at it and, pick apart psychologies, pick apart moves and how things are, despite the fact that it's 60, 70 years later in some of these matches, it's still very much the same.
And dude, some of the stuff, and Mr. Briscoe, I'll tell you, like, I always like to ask every older wrestler, like, hey, who was the best in their generation? And Dusty would always, Dusty, first of all, he said himself, which is the only wrestler to ever say that, by the way.
That's great.
Don't talk me.
But like Terry, I'll talk to Terry and Terry be like, man, Jack and Jerry were great. Or you talk to Ricky Steamboat, he like, man, Jack and Jerry were great. And I think for your brother got the higher accolades because he was the NWA champion. But man, I didn't grow up during your era, but I watch it now, and you were amazing, especially with your brother, your tag team psychology, cutting off the ring, and just the beautiful things that you guys had done in the ring. Even the turn, like I talked to Ricky Steamboat about, like, you guys were such big baby faces, and then the turn with falling on the figure four and then deliberately doing it, your stuff with Piper. I saw Piper come out, handed you and your brother your ass, and you're both selling for him. And then you come out, you're all fired up. It was just such great stuff. And I never, like I said, I didn't get a chance to appreciate, your stuff because I didn't get to see it. But watching it now, man, I love watching your stuff because
thank you, Tommy. But
it was brilliant.
The important thing that was the names that you mentioned and giving me those accolades. It could have never been done without the Roddy Pipers or Ricky and Jays and the Dories and Terrys. I mean, I think back. It's hard to say who was the greatest, and in any era, And I look at mine, and I think I was so blessed to share the ring with so many of those guys. Yeah. But some of the best guys weren't the biggest stars. Some of the best workers, they were the guys that right underneath that, and so I was just blessed to have so many guys that wanted to share their knowledge with you. And I think that's the important thing. And I wasn't trained in a gym like you and a lot of other guys, where I was basically on the job training. I got out of school and I was setting up the ring, and as I'd set up the ring, and a lot of old timers would come early and, hey kid, show me a double legger, show me a single legger like that, and I'll show you a little bit of work. And so that's basically how I learned to work. But I was blessed to have so many pros that would offer their advice and teach you. But Ricky and Jay, I mean, wow, what a great tag team they were. And the great thing about that deal, that entire heel turn was predicated on one thing that really loses a lot of focus during the matches. Jack and I had never been world tag team champions, so we kind of made that belt, the gold, and why we were turning heel. These young guys have it. The fans just happen to like, and it's something we've ever had, and we're at the end of our career, and we want that, and we're going to get it. So that really helped making a title mean something, and that world title and tag title in the Carolinas, as you guys know, that was the grail, the holy grail at the time.
Yeah, who'd have think making the title the main reason for men fighting?
Yeah.
Also for a heel change, a lot of times you turn a person heel, and well, he just became a bad person. Nobody just becomes a bad person. You may be a bad person, but there's a reason that you switch over in your head and start showing that, manifesting itself in a certain ways. And for Jerry and Jack to make that turn based upon the title, it made perfect sense. And that's the one thing I hate about any type of wrestling storylines over the last 50 years. When you see one, when someone just turns heel for no reason or turns babyface for no reason. You know, there's got to be a reason behind stuff. No matter how flimsy it is, there's got to at least be a reason for it. Otherwise, people have a hard time following.
Yeah, trust me, dealing in Impact all the time. We'll talk about it, and I just kind of go fundamentals. Hey, this person, you have to lose something or the ability to realize you're never going to achieve this. So then you have to cheat to do something, and then that's what the turn is all about. And I've uh, especially my biggest thing is a heat spot where, you know, hey, you're supposed to get sympathy on the babyface. A lot of people, they're just out wrestling the good guys. And I'll just be like, that's not a heat spot. And I'll literally say, I go, hey, man, if I could break this down to you. If you're sitting there watching television with your wife and you get a text at 11 o'clock and you laugh and your wife's like, oh, who is that? And you're like, oh, it's John. And then at midnight, you get a text again. Your wife still says, who is that? And oh, it's John. She's like, well, is that a girl in that picture? Oh yeah. Well, John's at a bar. You know, he just showed me a picture of a girl. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, if, you know, your phone goes off again and your wife says, like, who's that? And it's John. Why is he texting you? By that time, either your wife is going to say, let me see the phone, or you have to show her, like, here it is. Like, I just got caught cheating because that's what I'm doing. I'm cheating. And if not, if that first time when your wife says, who is that? And you're like, oh, this is this girl who's showing me her boobs and I want to have sex with her. I go, that's what you guys are basically going out there and doing. You're not showing that you're cheating. You're not being bad people.
Yeah, and they can't overthink it. One time I was working with Barry Horowitz and I said, I'll hit the rope, hit you with a tackle, hit your rope, hit you with another tackle. And he said, think about that. Why would I stand there the second time? I said, you think about it. Why in a fight would you shoot me off in the ropes and stand there anyway? I said, Stone Cold's on last. Nobody cares. Just take 2 tackles.
Psychology is key. And that's how you get people emotionally invested into these turns and all that stuff. And like,
hey, the key is who's going to become the Russian in the next few weeks.
No, not anymore.
So Tommy, Johnny Ross, how long did your school last, and where was the first place that you went after you got out with Johnny?
I had my first match October 28th, 1989. I had my second match December 3rd, 1989. I was undefeated in 1989, guys, just so you that resonates. Then in
1990, animal.
In 1990, I had 4 whopping matches, but I was walking around town like I was Joe Pro Wrestler. And again, my father, a very, very brilliant man, he had 5 masters, and he was just like, hey, let me ask you something. You're a pro wrestler, right? And I was like, yep. He goes, you paid him how much money? And I was like, $3,000. And he goes, how much money have you made? And I said, nothing. And he goes, and how is this if you're going to pay for car insurance, do all these things? How are you a pro wrestler? And I was
and you
just
dropped out of school too, right?
Nope. The deal I made with my parents was I had to finish college. I was on the 5-year plan, but I finished it. And then Taz had gotten to an argument with Johnny, and because Johnny didn't want us to go wrestle other places. And then in 91, I hooked up with Savoldi's in ICW. And I've literally been on television since 1991 straight.
So Tommy, when you went to Savoldi's, was that with your real name? And I've read the story. I don't know where it comes from, but in honor of the American Dream,
yes,
that's how you come up with Tommy Dreamer. You're Northeastern. You think Bruno or Pedro or Ivan or one of those great stars there, but that Florida championship hooked you, right?
Big time. Real quick, right before my first ever match, Johnny asked me my name, and I wanted to be a mix between Sting and the Great Muta. And I was going to paint my face, and I actually used to do a roundabout handspring elbow like Muta. I had my hair like Muta, like Sting, except I had a sweet mullet. And I tell Johnny I wanted my name to be Tommy Acid, and I was going to spit acid in guys' eyes. Again, my first match, and I'm telling my trainer what I'm going to do, and he's soaking it all in. And he goes, you're too good looking to be a baby face. Change the name, or I'm going to announce you as Tommy Dickhead. And I was just like, oh, God, I don't want to be Tommy Dickhead. So then I was just like, it's always been my dream to be a professional wrestler. Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, Tommy Dreamer it was. And then I've been off as Tommy Dreamer, like I said, since 91 on television. So it was all because of Dream.
It's amazing your idea as a young wrestler. All of us went through that about what we're going to be. We're going to be some Marvel superhero and we're going to do all this, have this music. Then you get in there and go, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah. Also just telling your that literally like being like, you know, you're going, you get drafted by the NFL and you're telling your coach what position you're going to play, what you're going to do. And I'm not even one match in yet. And he just seriously looked at me. He's like, you're going to be Tommy Dickhead if you don't find that name. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be Tommy Dickhead. And I had my first match was in Brooklyn at that arena. I had sold 50 tickets. And then the next time I had 101 tickets sold. So, if that continued, I probably would have been Johnny's champion because he was making a boatload off of my friends.
Now that's how you guys got paid, right? I think, who was it? DeMont told us that story. On you got paid on how many tickets you sold. And
Bill DeMont told us the story on a wonderful show that
never aired.
We don't know where it is.
A new story.
He was supposed to give you $1 a ticket, but I never collected on that bounty. So,
and that was where your grandmother was going to put a hit on Bill DeMont, right?
That was my aunt. And Bill DeMott jumped me on my second thing. We're in Brooklyn, New York. My family did have some connections with some unsavory people. And Bill, my aunt, God rest her soul, my grandfather hits the ring. And my aunt, as Bill's guest, she goes, you don't know who you're messing with. She actually said fucking with. And she's like, I'm going to put a hit on you. We're from Brooklyn. And Bill was terrified, and Bill put on a mask and ran out the back door to get there because my family wanted to beat up Bill.
Okay, go back here now. Your family had some unsavory relationship there. I want to describe that exactly because you're from Brooklyn, and then you put two and two together. It don't take a Texan to figure out that what you're talking about.
Well, my grandfather, he worked for some unsavory people back in the day. It was a long time ago with there was a riot in Brooklyn between it was the Teamsters versus the police, and the Teamsters were a very, very solid foundation, and there was a real riot. My uncle had knocked out a horse. It was in the front page of the New York Post.
Knocked out a horse.
He knocked out. Why did he knock out a horse?
Well, they were blocking the shipments to come in because they weren't. It was all in the Brooklyn docks back in the day. So then here come the cops. So then they laid out boards with nails on them. So when the horses stepped on it, and then there was a real like Pier 6 brawl, hence where the term came from. And there was he was arrested for punching a horse. And my grandfather worked with him.
And he dropped the horse?
He hit it. I know that. I don't know if he knocked it out, but he did blast a horse and was arrested for that. And there was like, it was a family heirloom passed around.
Names? What? Why did he?
What was that movie where that football player knocked out the Mongo?
Blazing Saddles.
Blazing Saddles, yeah.
Mongo knocks out the horse.
So this is the scene out of Blazing Saddles, only real, right?
I think maybe they took it from there because it was a legendary story that you can kind of look up because it was in the front page of the paper, and I had seen it when I was a kid, like this family heirloom that was passed down. Like, hey, look at your grandfather and his brother.
But you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's like, you'd think you'd hit the guy that was on the horse, not the horse.
He probably did both. Listen, I think every one of us has been in a real riot, and you hit everything. I know I've been in a lot of riots, and you hit everything.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And go back one more thing though. Another hole.
I like how you're popping. You're popping so much.
Bill DeMott weighed 350 pounds. He told us at the time on his show that will never air because I lost it. And then he puts on a mask and he thinks he's hiding in the same arena.
And Pro Wrestling
That's one
101.
of the silliest things I've ever heard.
But he escaped.
And he lived to tell the story.
Yeah.
So here's Bill Mott, 350 pounds. Here's Bill Mott, 350 pounds with mask on, and you don't realize it must have been a hell of a mask.
And I think he also probably put on those old satin jackets. And back then he wrestled as Big Sweet William, and it was like a purple jacket. And I'm sure it even had his name on it. And he just ran out the back door.
That's awesome.
We're all marks. Come on now.
And this is your grandmother threatening him with
That was my aunt.
your aunt. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
My grandfather did hit the ring too, and he dropped a security guard. It was crazy. It seriously was. I have it on VCR.
Do you? Oh man.
And it was a
That's
mini
awesome.
riot, all caused by my own family.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When we did the angle in El Paso, Eddie told me afterwards he had smartened up his family and his friends. He was worried that one of them would do the same thing.
I didn't. And dude, my mom is 81 years old, and whenever she watches me wrestle, I call her all the time, and she'll be like, "Did you win?" And I think my mom thinks I'm like on this Goldberg streak, because I've stopped telling her that I lose, because she'd be like, "Why did you lose?" And I'm like, "Well, Mom, it's scripted." And she'll be like, "No, I know." And she still hates when wrestlers put their foot on my throat, and she turns away whenever she sees it. And she's like, "I just can't." And she's like, "You're my son." And I'm like, "But Ma, he's not really trying to like take my win." And she goes, "I just can't watch it." So it's pretty funny. And I've never told her, and I don't feel wrestling is fake, because especially when I wake up in the morning and my mom has seen me. It's funny too. Like, my friends started calling her Jackie Stallone. ECW was this redheaded stepchild where she didn't acknowledge it. I always had scars all over my head. She once caught me in the backyard blowing fireballs, because Terry Funk was teaching me how to do it. And I'm in my backyard with a branding iron in New York and lamp oil spitting fire. And she's like, "What are you doing? I hate this wrestling." Her good looking Guido's son is covered in scars, bleeding every weekend. But then once I went to the WWE and people started knowing me more, and I had an action figure, my mom was pro wrestling mom 101. She became a Hollywood mom.
My first action figure, I saw it at Walmart. And you know how you are when you see your first one. I loaded up all of them, put them in the buggy, and I go to the checkout, and I thought, wait a minute, I can't buy my own action figure. So I went back and I hit them, and I told my mom, go buy them.
You hit them like somebody's going to rush the store.
Yeah, like the Justin Hawk Bradshaw action figure was in such demand. If I hadn't hit them, they'd still be there on the shelf, just waiting to be sold.
If you want to talk about, like, I remember the joy of my first time. I have every you had Bill Apter on. I have every wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Illustrated from 1979 till about 1995. But whenever I would be in there, I would open up the magazines back when magazines were popular. And if my picture was there, I'd open up every magazine to my picture and just leave it there when I walk out.
That's great.
Yeah, man. It's still real to me, damn it.
Okay, so you left Johnny's now. Okay, take us on that journey. You left Johnny's. ECW was just still a future wish for Paulie and those guys there. But Taz, did you guys kind of stick around together and work around the Northeast together during that?
Yes, Taz and I we'd travel everywhere together. I drove. He worked me into saying he had like this night blindness thing with his eyes, so I just drove everywhere. He would drive from Queens to my house, and then we'd go work every weekend for the Savoldis, and then we had hooked up. He was going to wrestle Sabu at the ECW arena, and I was just going to drive him. And I show up with my stuff. I wrestled under a mask that night that he wrestles Sabu, and then the next day they did me versus Taz for ECW television. And we used to have like really, really ahead of their times / doing a lot of high spots that made nothing. But like, I would take a Northern Lights suplex off the top rope from Taz. And these are things that only the Steiners are doing, And here's these two guys on the Northeast where we'd always put this really, really good match that we thought was great together. And it was myself, Chris Candido sometimes got thrown into the mix, but we were like the known next level of guys to make it / hard workers. We always were working out, trying our best to be in shape. And then I wrestled Taz, have a good match. and that's it. Paul Heyman calls me up maybe 3 days later. He asked me to come to the studio. I drive to the studio. We watch my match. And at the end of the match, there was 4 people standing. And Paulie goes, "You see that? These people believe in you. I could do something with you." And I was just like, okay. Like, I just thought ECW was just this random indie. And so they did the entire TV show where all the heels went up. Shane Douglas went up, Mr. Hughes went up, Public Enemy. And then Joey Styles is wrapping up the show. And then he's like, wait, go back to the live ring. And he goes, "This crowd that threw snowballs at Santa Claus, this hardcore town is giving this pretty boy, Tommy Dreamer, a standing ovation. Maybe there's hope for ECW after all." And that's how they went off the air. And it was literally 4 people appreciating my hard-earned work. And that's how we went off the air. And then, like, it was almost like foretell that I would be known as the heart and soul of ECW. But Paul had that unique vision for me and did like a lot of things to try to help me get over. Like, I was the first guy to ever kick out of Jimmy Snuka's Superfly Splash, which I was starting to get over. But then when I got caned for real, that was where it took me next level. And then the feud between me and Raven, we were just off and going and been on that ride ever since.
How did you first meet Paul?
We live real close to each other. Yonkers and Scarsdale are the next town. My old gym was literally on the bottom of the hill of his house. We had a mutual friend. We met at Nathan's hot dog place that was right by, figure me and Paul go out to eat. And I handed him my old school 8x10 and VCR tape. He said he had heard of me. We went, we ate, we leave.
You ate at Nathan's?
Yeah.
At the hot dog stand?
Not the one in Coney Island, but there was one in Yonkers. It was a famous place in Yonkers. And then funny that night too, where I call him just to say, "Hey, I'm going to be there with my boot." And Paul answers the phone, and I was like, "Hey, Paul, it's Tommy Dreamer." And I had met him already. We had like a lunch, and he was just like, "This isn't Paul. This is his friend Doug." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Paul, this is you." And he goes, "No, this is his friend Doug." And I was like, "Okay, is Paul there?" And I think like he's joking with me. And he's like, "Paul's busy. How can I help you?" And I was just like, "Well, Paul." And he goes, "This isn't Paul. This is Doug." And I'm like, "Okay, Doug, can you tell Paul that I'm driving Taz and I'll be at the ECW arena, even though it was known as ECW arena. And if he needs me, I'll be there." And he's like, "Okay, I'll tell him." I go, "Thanks, Paul." And he goes, "This isn't Paul. This is Doug." And it should have been fortuitous for our relationship years ago. So
That's
right off
insane.
That is. Only Paul. Only Doug.
Doug, that's great.
Yep. So, but then the rest was history. And to his credit, man, Paul, and as you guys know, there was always a different divide between the boys and the office, but Paul allowed me to be in the studio. Again, we just lived next to each other. He brought me into the studio, taught me at 24 years old, which was unheard of, how to edit a TV show. And he was also, I mean, I'm sure Mr. Brisco knew Paul when he was younger, but like he's always around the business, and he was always this young guy who, wanted to do other things outside. He couldn't wrestle, and he just took me in the office, and then we would, edit the TV show. Then he taught me, we'd be booking stuff in the car. So, I mean, I got a lot of valuable lessons, as well as helped me so much with promos. And what I wish the business had now is I would walk through that curtain and I would have Paul, Mick Foley, and Terry Funk all helping me try to be better. And now at times, and I see it all the time, there's people like the blind leading the blind, or their friends telling them how good they did. And I don't care about how good I did. What did I do wrong so I can improve on that? And there's not enough leaders. When I worked at WWE, at times I would get frustrated because people would just tell me I did good because I hit my time, and Vince wasn't mad, as opposed to, well, if I did so good, how come I'm not the champion? How come, it's just, you want that feedback. And I tell everybody, Tom Brady, greatest quarterback of all time, the GOAT, most Super Bowls. He has a head coach, a quarterback's coach, an offensive coach, offensive line, all the players, everybody trying to make him be the best. And he's the best at already what he does. And we don't have that, especially on the indies.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on anybody for saying this because I'm not around any wrestling group enough to know what's going on. So I don't know, but I know from my own personal perspective, sometimes guys will look at you, I'm with Ron a lot on some of these signings. It's kind of like, oh, that was the old style. They don't really know, what's going on today. And so they just kind of seek advice from themselves or from social media, which is just an echo chamber of your own thoughts, because you block anybody you don't like, or I do. So it's it's something that it can be lost, and there may be this going on in different places. I don't know that because I'm not day to day in any type of wrestling business, but it's invaluable to seek the advice of guys like Mr. Briscoe or Terry Funk or anybody you have access to that drew money. And
yeah. I'm in a locker room. If I'm a tag team, I'm going to get the most information I can from Mr. Briscoe or from you, John. You were part of a successful tag team, or then, everyone's looking about. I mean, think about your career, and I don't think you get enough credit for changing your stuff up and taking a risk. Because if you want to know how low you were on a totem pole, I beat you. And
did you beat me for the hardcore title?
Many times. I whooped your ass.
No.
But this was when
I knew you'd beat me at least once, but
I beat you on television as well.
I blocked out all the other ones. Just
when Tommy Dreamer's
I blocked out all my losses, by the way, not just you.
Well, when Tommy Dreamer's beating you in WWE, you fall way down the food chain. So, but you went and changed your entire gimmick, and there's a lot of reinventing himself. I mean, you were this badass barroom brawler that, your shelf life, I don't want to say expired, but you had a completely different gimmick and took your career next level because of it.
Yeah, and most guys, and thank you, very kind of you said, most guys that last a long time change their characters or change their gimmicks, or at least they have different iterations of it. You look at even The Undertaker, one of the most iconic images of all time. He's gone through some pretty drastic changes. From the dead man to the biker, back to the dead man to the real dark dead man. I mean, it's, the guys who last have to figure out a way to change with the times.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people, like when you get started and you have an idea of what you want to be, that's why, okay, look, that may work, but it may not. And even if it works, it may work for a certain amount of time. And then you may have to go to something else. That's why people, I think, should always be thinking and looking around. Look at Sergeant Slaughter. Sergeant Slaughter was always on the political side of one or the other, being a heel or a baby, and made a lot of money because of it.
Yes, I loved watching Sarge work too, man. I paid many times to see Sergeant Slaughter get his ass kicked or kick some ass.
Hey, did you guys, when y'all were, you mentioned the Steiners, and those Steiners, for those that don't know, they were doing some groundbreaking stuff back in the day, man. Oh my God. We used to get those tapes and just try to figure out how to do some of those suplexes. Did you guys do the same thing? Because you mentioned the Steiner suplexes. We were trying to poach anything they could do. We couldn't do most of them.
Yeah, no, I took everything. And when you say you had Bill DeMott on, I'm taking this 300+ pound elbow drop or this moonsault that he's trying to do. For Taz, I took every stupid Taz suplex imaginable, and it would just be like, no, that didn't work. But yes, Scott, for a big man, just the Frankensteiner alone.
They were a different level. They were, when the matches they had, especially in Japan, with I think Suzuki and maybe Hawk. Some of those are some of the best matches I've ever seen. It's just unbelievable how good the Steiners were.
Or the moonsault body slam, where he would pick you like this and pretty much do a moonsault, always land on his own head, and then just fire up like total no-sell.
Yeah. Something you mentioned about, moments creating you, like what Joey Styles said about you. It's kind of like the concession stand brawl in down in Memphis territory, that made that and popped the territory. Your Kane match with Sandman really was something that set you off with ECW, right?
Yep. Thank God. I wasn't getting over. And like I said, first got a kick out of Jimmy Snuka's splash, doing all these things. There was a real incident in Singapore where a kid, United States citizen, had gotten arrested for selling drugs, and it was the uproar of a U.S. citizen was going to get caned in Singapore. So it was national news. Paul comes up with the idea: loser of a match gets caned with 10 lashes, and I got the 10 lashes. It was Taz who said, "Listen, man, this kid is tough. We just got to show it." And I got caned for real, and it wasn't a gimmicked cane. It killed. I didn't want to get up, but the fans, that the first hit, they cheer. You can watch us all on the network. The second hit, they cheer. The third hit, you could start seeing my back start bleeding. And by that 10th hit, everybody was cheering for me. And it was just, next level where you got over. And then you could watch it happen. And I said it to Sandman, and it was so emotional. His lower lip was quivering. And I said, I'm never going to stop. I'm going to keep getting up for these people, because it was real. I didn't want to get up, but it was one of those where I had to. And I say this all the time, and I know you'll understand this. Tommy Dreamer will always fight for the fans. You don't want to let the fans down. I don't know what adrenaline, but me, I have, it's funny. My wife, Beulah McGillicuddy, I'll stub my toe, drop on the floor crying about, oh my God, my toe. And she's like, I've seen you on fire and you don't sell it as much. And I was like, that's Tommy Dreamer, Tom Laughlin. No, this is, but you don't let the fans down ever. It's just, did I want to take it? No. And I have all the scars to prove it, but yeah, that helped me next level. And then Raven and our whole storyline, that got me to the next level. There's a famous thing where I pile drive Beulah. I hit my pose. I go into the crowd, and everybody's chanting ECW. Man, I'm covered in blood. When I walked through that curtain, Paul was there, hugged me, embraced me like a father embraced a son, where you just won a Super Bowl or whatever. And he looked and like grabbed my face and was just like, you did it. You got over. And he's like, as long as you don't let them down, you'll stay that way forever. And, it was an amazing thing that happened. But it's been kind of true, because I just wrestled 3 shows this past weekend. And as soon as I go out there, they chant ECW, ECW, ECW.
That's awesome. Isn't the worst thing ever when they say about you, that's a really tough person. Because then you're about to take a bunch of shit. You're about to get hit by everything. He's really tough. Oh, good. We can hit him with everything.
Yeah. Or that damn Singapore cane. I tell everybody, man, this is the only real weapon in professional wrestling. A table's for putting stuff on, a chair is for sitting. This is a real weapon. And no matter how much you gimmick it, it cuts you, it hurts.
This when Shamrock got hit with one in the head. I mean, it's just like, oh,
yeah. It's a training tool for people in martial arts. It sucks. I'm the stupidest babyface ever, because I'll bring it to the ring, but it always gets used on me.
Funny how that happens.
Yeah. And the other guy, I'm sorry. I want to give Terry Funk his props too for helping me, and Mick Foley. But the greatest thing that Terry Funk had said to me, and I think about it, he's like, grow a goatee. You're a good looking kid, but it'll make you look tougher. And he goes, and when you're my age, it'll hide your double chin. So like, he was a Svengali genius, because it really has helped me.
I didn't get to see ECW because we were on the road all the time. I didn't get to see WCW really either, except when they put it up in the, back in that dressing room during the war. But when I was in I think One Night Stand, I think was the one where I was part of, I got it at that point. That was the greatest crowd I'd ever been in front of. It was so passionate. It was so energetic. What was it about ECW that made it that way?
Man, it was, like I said, you go back and watch, you can literally see the company grow. I joke about it. Paul would never lie to his audience in an era where, the business needed change, and it was just in your face, and people felt like it was their own, where people were talking, we talked tape traders, all that stuff. They'd be like, man, pro wrestling is what it is. You know, you could but it was like you were a smart insider if you followed this thing called ECW. And a lot of fans thought it was real. And at times, I mean, you know, they see all this crazy stuff that we were doing. And, you know, we pushed the envelope at first of violence. And then after that, it was, you know, great wrestlers. And like wherever your competition would go to the right, Paul would go to the left, and he was brilliant about that. You know, when we're doing all this violent stuff, then he brings in Benoit, Guerrero, and Malenko, and we're having these amazing wrestling matches. And then when they go to WCW, we bring in Rey Mysterio and the Luchadors, and we introduce Lucha Libre, you know, really to a prominent level. It's just, and then when they go to WCW, he brings in Tajiri and Super Crazy, which is a hybrid mix of every style. And he was brilliant with that. And also real life storylines, you know. We did the first ever pregnancy angle in wrestling. We did the first ever LBGQ angle with, you know, two girls kissing, got thrown off of every network, putting women in the main event. We did everything that was very, very in your face and real life storylines. And I think, but the passionate fan base, you know, here's Terry Funk, this older veteran who, you know, and, you know, crying at his father's grave before he's got his last shot to win a world title going into a pay-per-view, because it was, for all of us, it was real, you know, and we couldn't compete with WCW's big bucks or, you know, Paul was great because he branded the brand to be the most popular thing because we didn't have that money. And, you know, between Vince and WCW, they were the enemy. And we were just, and the fans knew that. It was just, the business needed change. It was right place, right time.
Tommy, when did you? I know I was like John. I didn't watch a lot of ECW because we were working our rear end off too. But I remember you guys did a taping down in Florida. I think it's Fort Lauderdale to War Memorial or somewhere down. And that seemed like the changing of the guard there, where you guys were kind of backing off the violent stuff. Was it a TV deal where you told you need to kind of back off the violence, or was that just a evolution of your company growing?
It was the evolution of everybody. You know, we had this guy who was drinking beers and smoking cigarettes to the ring. Okay, now WWE has a guy who's drinking beers, not smoking, because Vince would have fired him, but drinking beers, or everybody's breaking tables. They're all doing all these things that we're kind of doing because, you know, the business, we all kind of borrow from each other. So we just kind of just had to change it up. And also, you know, with the players, you keep losing key players. You have to adapt. I think the beauty of ECW, like let's say when the Dudleys left, the Impact players, Lance Storm and Justin Credible, literally fit their spot in a heartbeat. And or the business, when everybody's breaking tables, you know, Sabu was the first to use tables all the time, and then Public Enemy starts using them. Once everyone's breaking tables, we actually stop breaking tables and make people want it. It's just, Paul was great with psychology. He really was.
He is. Yeah.
What could have happened to ECW to make it keep going? Or do you think there was always a finite shelf life of ECW?
Back then, I thought it would have lasted forever. There was a lot of mismanagement. We also, none of us knew Paul was kind of in the pocket of WWE. You know, I find all this stuff out later. I mean, hell, most of the stuff we did was illegal. You know,
at most states, yeah.
I mean, dude, seriously, like look at the Sandman. Sandman would come to the ring drunk. If that happened today and somebody got hurt, how dare a company let a wrestler get drunk? Music. You look at what Tony Khan is doing in AEW. Using commercial music was a big key that made ECW stand out. But we had no roots to any of that, you know? So there was just, I mean, fighting outside. There was times, I remember Rey Mysterio and Hoovy fought outside, and Ray does a Rana off of a guy's car, and they break the guy's mirror, dent his car, and his thing gets broken. The guy's outside chanting ECW because his car was seen on television. If that happened today, you're sued. Fighting in the crowd, you're sued. So we couldn't have gotten away with the things that we had gotten away with, or like riots. Like I've now learned that I have some severe PTSD because of the stuff that happened in ECW, where I like to go to concerts now, but because I'm wearing a mask and I'm not seen. But I mean, I've told this story a few times. Beulah, she had her back against the guardrail. A fan grabbed her by the hair, pulled her backwards, and three dudes just start kicking the crap out of her. And this is a woman. And all you'd hear, fight. We come in the back, and what does she say? Because, she was in the business. I got too close to the guardrail. Never do that again. Or another time, Sandman had her on he's trying to get over the guardrail to go to the merchandise table with her. And he's doing the Miss Elizabeth Randy Savage pose. And then he can't get over the guardrail. So he flips her and he puts her like he's going to power slam her, but she's wearing a miniskirt and her ass is out. He gets over the guardrail, and I watch this and I see a converge of men put their hands in every hole that she has, start ripping her underwear. They pull her down, and they're trying to do whatever they can. And then here come the ECW locker room, and we laid out like 70 people because and then I yelled at her, how dare you go with Sandman? And here was a girl who was sexually attacked by a group of people. And if this happened today, we would we'd be out of business.
Yeah, and justifiably so with that. I mean,
but if you saying it and listen, I mean, your listeners are going to hear this. That happened on a weekly basis. We had police officers pull guns and a police officer called New Jack the N-word, and the entire locker room emptied out. We're beating up police, and they pull out their guns, and we're like, shoot us. This was a constant basis of all time. It was nuts, dude.
Tell us about the story of the day that Sandman died and then worked.
Yeah.
This is the greatest story.
Okay. My first show, running a show without Paul Heyman, and it's packed. I have no Guido. I have no Bill Alfonso. I have no Rhino. I have no Sandman. I have no Raven. And I'm trying to refinagle the show. Guido's always working first, the FBI versus Meanie and the BWO. Eventually, the first match is in the ring. Here comes Rhino. And Rhino was a rookie and very, very soft-spoken. He blows past me. He's like, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, where the hell is he? And he goes in this, we go in this private room. He drops his bag and he starts crying. And I'm like, ugh, these guys have been on him. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm late. What am I doing? These guys, man, I can't travel with them anymore. Sandman is dead. What am I doing? Like, what's going on? And I went, what? And I go, he's like, what am I doing? I go, Sandman's dead? And he goes, yeah, he overdosed in the car. And now he just told me my friend died. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't know. He's dead, but I think he's alive. In walks Bill Alfonso. Daddy, he's okay. We think it'll be all right. Long story short, they pull over. Sandman overdoses in the car. And like true pro wrestlers, they pull over and they drop him off at a hospital. Guido runs in and says, hey, there's a dead guy out here. Gets in the car. They drive away because you don't want to get caught with a dead person in your car. So we're trying to get updates. I send Fonzie back to the hospital to see if my friend is dead or not. And the show was going on. And then
Shoot.
And they basically he wrestled that night when he had officially died of a drug overdose. That's his story to tell, but I had to go deal with it from my end.
So Rhino just wants to know what he's doing. And by the way, Sandman's dead.
Hey, it happens, bro. Hence why ECW could not have existed today.
Tommy, were you shocked that there weren't a more amount of injuries than what you guys had? I know you guys had the obvious nicks and bruises and cuts, but I mean, the things that you did and the crew and the talent did was just amazing for guys to still be walking around and telling the story. They're jumping off the balconies. I mean, just insane type things. Are you shocked that there wasn't more injuries, severe injuries, and then basically more lawsuits?
Lawsuits, 1000%. My biggest thing, I think, of hepatitis and or AIDS. I mean, I used to literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 punch Raven, suck up his blood and spit it out to the crowd. And none of us were blood tested. And, you know, by how much the wrestlers were partying, plus, you know, rampant, I guess, sex back in the day, you know, we're talking the 90s. I think that's the biggest thing of how many, you know, people haven't gotten more blood issues back then. And again, all that blood, all that stuff. I mean, I remember it would almost become a thing. I'd be bleeding and the fans would hold out their ticket and I would put out my head and fans would rub their ticket on my head. And it was like a rite of passage that, hey, you were at the ECW arena. And, you know, but how could you have all these men bleeding without being tested today?
Well, what was your most insane rules match that you can recall?
The scaffold match that I had with Brian Lee.
I always thought that was the dumbest thing ever. There's no way to get out of that. I mean, you got to hang on and fall, and you look stupid falling. To me, they want to see somebody fall off and take a bump on their head. You can't do that. I just thought scaffold matches were the dumbest concept possible.
Well, we dumped it even more because we put a bunch of tables in the ring, and I had taken a lot. I took a choke slam from the top of the cage. I took a choke slam from every highest point of the building, which led to we have a scaffold match. Sandman built the scaffold, number one. And we had this rickety scaffolding going up only one way, but if you go back and watch it, he chained this platform to the top of the building, which was swaying once we got up there. And I was also afraid of heights, but Tommy Dreamer will not let you down. And you go back, I actually just saw a picture of it. We have the match, you know, I go over. At one point, Brian Lee was choking me with this black cord, and I'm selling. I come in the back, and Brian comes in the back, and the owner of the venue, he looks at me, he's like, come here. And I knew him. And he goes, that cord was all the electricity from the building. I have no clue how the two of you weren't electrocuted to death while you were up there. Brian just reached up, grabbed it, and choked me with it. And I found a picture of it, and I was just like, wow, like you could totally see it was a real live electric cord that he just decided to snatch out of the top of the building. But we were hardcore, so I could have survived electrocution.
Of course. Jeff Hardy told me one time, he goes, I'm going to jump off my brother's back, clothesline me in midair. And I said, well, Jeff, where are you going to land? And he goes, it doesn't matter. I go, it does matter. It matters a lot to me. It may not to you. Sure enough, I hit him. He landed like some crazy thing, and he was fine. He's just Jeff Hardy.
He was extreme. Okay.
How are you? Because you're the same as Jeff Hardy. You're like made of rubber or something. How are you able to even get on a Zoom today, all the bumps you took?
Actually, man, I'm very, very blessed. I feel great. I would always say muscles tear and rip, but fat absorbs. So maybe that was, I don't live a life of pain. When I get on a plane, I'm in a lot of pain. I also think it goes to, I guess, an amazing stat about me. I've never had a surgery. But
really?
when I do,
you've never had a surgery?
No.
That is amazing.
But when I do, I'm going to get everything. Lipo, boobs. I'm going to get a whole new Tommy.
You look great with boobs. I mean, like D's. I mean, like.
Well, I'm about a C cup already. So.
I was going to say, did you have them back in 2002?
Yeah. They just hang a lot lower now.
That was Layfield that had
them. But yeah, I do a lot of different things. And also I think it goes to it's always, wrestling, or I would always work out. I was always a gym guy. I know I train really hard to look this bad, which is quite sad, but it's the breaking down of your body. I'll wake up every morning and I'll do 45 minutes of cardio a day. If I could practice diet, I think I look a lot better, but it's, you go through the motions as you're hurt. There's a lot of things I can't do anymore. Like I can't tie my shoes without putting it up on a place, and I can't put on my socks. I have to lay down on a bed, and it's called Sock Olympics. Hornswoggle loves it because I got to try to catch my big toe over my sock, and then I pull it up. But besides that, I've been blessed. Like I said, I just wrestled 3 days in a row. And I love when I have good matches, and I still kind of want to do a few more things before I call it a career.
You had some fun
when you have your matches. Do you go looking for feedback after, even at this stage of your career, after a match?
I do. I mean, especially when I'm working on television with Impact, and you'll have your guys that you trust, that'll tell you how you looked. Was I moving slow? You don't want to look like an old man, but I mean, even I remember Terry asking me, and I think about what Terry did. He was in his 50s and I was in my 20s, and he's hanging with all these guys, but he would be like, "What'd you think? How did I do?" Because he knew he had that, rapport with myself, Shane Douglas, and Mick Foley. Like, did I look old? How were my punches? Stuff like, and this is Terry Funk.
Terry's very conscious of that stuff all the time.
And
I think it was Buddy Landell that told me. I used to come back. As any young kid who starts in the business, you'd come back and you'd ask everybody in the dressing room, "How was your match?" Most of the guys didn't see it, but they'd tell you anyway. "Oh, it's great, kid, great." And they give you nothing of value as far as feedback. And I think it was Buddy who pulled me aside, gave me some of the best advice I ever had. He goes, "Kid, if you know you had a good match, you know you had a good match." He said, "You don't have to come in here and seek reassurance from everybody in the dressing room. Just makes you look like a green, stupid kid." He said, "Find you a couple people you trust."
Yep.
And he said, "Pull them aside away from everybody and ask them." That was a little bit different back then in the day in the dressing room. Now it's a little more accepted, that going on. Now you have more guys standing at the curtain that are willing to help you when you come back through. But it was such good advice to don't come back and have to get reassurance from the entire dressing room. "You see my match? You see my match?" Just find you a couple guys you trust. Go up to them and ask them, because they'll give you good feedback.
I just wrestled Friday. We're in a bar, had 400 people, and I come in the back, and Ricky Morton goes, "Man, your match was good. Why are you taking so many bumps? Blah, 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 blah." And I was like, "Well, because I love it." He goes, "I do too." And this was after I watched his match, and I go, "I dare you at 63 to keep on taking all these bumps." And I think he said, he took 3 tackles from Connor of the Ascension, and they told a great story. But I've then realized Ricky Morton's watching my match and I'm watching his, and we're both giving each other feedback. And I said, "I love when you guys are on the card, both you and Robert, because I'm not the oldest guy on the card anymore. But it's just, we both love it." And another thing that I love about pro wrestling, Robert Gibson, he's just like myself. I know I'm not the Tommy Dreamer I used to be. Robert Gibson needed help to sit down as well as help to get up. But yet when he got in that ring, he was Robert Gibson and was coming into the ring for his tag, just like Robert Gibson did, locking up, doing everything. And I was just like, I'm literally watching a superhero performance, because I'm helping a man to sit on a couch, but yet he's out there and he's Robert Gibson. And I was just like, this is what I love about this business, because you can do incredible things in front of people.
I know you see Ricky back in the day. Ricky would sit in the back. He'd sit there and just smoke a cigarette. He'd be talking and telling stories, and Robert's putting him over like the tag team partners do. And then all of a sudden his music hits. He hadn't stretched. He's barely laced his boots. He's just sitting there having a cigarette, and he goes out and wrestles 45 minutes, and the other guys are blown up, and he's fine. Comes back, smokes a cigarette, and keeps talking. It's just Ricky Ricky was so good in the ring, but he also had this God's gift of cardio that was just unbelievable, like a lot of those old timers did.
Yep. And I tell you, man, I sat back and I watched it, and though they're missing hair and they're heavier, but I was like, that's still the Rock and Roll Express. It was awesome. It was
you dang right it is. Those boys drew some money.
And still are, because it was a packed house.
Go ahead, John.
Tommy, I was going to ask you something, kind of a non sequitur, but the hardcore stuff. Jerry and I are doing this. We do this thing we mentioned, best of the best. We watch old matches, do watch alongs, and talk about them. This past week we had Tiger Jeet Singh and Terry Funk in the death match tournament, FMW over in Japan. Then I think next week we're going to do Cactus and Terry. People say the greatest death match of all time. But when is too much too much? You know what I'm saying? I mean, to me, this death match tournament was too much. I mean, I'm not against death matches. I'm not against the hardcore stuff. Believe me, I juiced a million freaking times, did hardcore stuff. I'm fine with it. But when is it too much? Because, you know, you talk about ECW, and when everybody went to tables, you guys went to wrestling. When guys went to wrestling, you guys went to something else.
Right.
But the stuff with the death matches, to me, I think can be overdone.
Yes. I'd be a hypocrite, and I say this all the time, to judge people, because I did some really, really stupid things. I could literally ask my mailman and my next door neighbor to hit each other over the head with light tubes, and they could do that, but that's not wrestling. If you add, I guess, some psychology to it or build up to it, you look at, there's a uniqueness, like people like horror gore films, but then the end of the day will always be professional wrestling. You look at the company GCW, they'll do some crazy stuff, but they just drew a really good house, but in the Hammerstein Ballroom, but they had some really, really good wrestlers on there. And, you know, look at Matt Cardona, what he has done. Joey Janela, there's different stages of it. Those light tubes, you have to dispose of them, particularly when you throw them out in the garbage, because they cause cancer carcinogenics in them. And then people are busting them each overhead and breathing in those fumes. I don't think that is worth it when they're doing it at just, you know, a bar or doing it somewhere. And I get it. Like I said, I'd be a hypocrite, but I just worry about people's future. And it's also then, okay, well, what are you getting paid out of it? Everybody's hard work culminated at this big event for the Hammerstein. Cool. How are you going to pick up on that? And hopefully they can maintain it. But you need to have psychology, I guess, with that, or build to it. But light tubes, man, they scare me, because like Matt Cardona had a piece of glass in him for a month and had to go back to the hospital, because just like fire, glass cuts differently. You can't control it, just like you can't control fire. And if you have a piece of glass that may have a cancerous thing on it, guess what you just hit your body with? That's going to affect you in the long term. So those are some of the things you have to think about.
And he ain't Sandman. He ain't gonna die, kick out, and come back.
No.
Well, he might. I don't know. Matt Cardona.
Yeah.
He's very talented. So we never know. You know, Jerry Lawler died on air and came back. So it's not like that's completely
Everything's been
out
done
of the realm
before.
of possible. Only King would die on air. What a babyface would die on air, steal the main event thunder, and then come back.
Yep, that's pro wrestling 101 right there.
Speaking of dying, Tommy, of course you ended up with WWE, but during those final days of ECW, could you guys feel what was going on? Could you feel that, hey man, we're not too much longer for this topic?
There was always hope, and there's so many stories about it. There was always hope. You know, Paul. We had come real close to getting on the USA Network after WWE had jumped to Spike. If you remember that time, Spike basically lied to us. Well, again, I don't know because of Paul's involvement, but Spike used us to get into the wrestling market and didn't fulfill their obligations, also claimed poverty. And then I think after a year, found $110 million for WWE programming. It was under their pillow somewhere. They hadn't seen it. And then we were without a television network. But the guy who used to be the head of Madison Square Garden Network became the head of programming on USA. We were supposed to go there. There was so many different, where we don't know what really was truthful or not because of Paul. But we always had hope. And even up until, I mean, hell, the company was not running. The sad part was, without television, without anything, we still drew 2 back-to-back sold at nights at the Hammerstein. And those are the things that gave us hope. And we all like didn't think like, Paul was going to come through for us. But at the end of the day, like I remember I actually went and visited Bubba and Devon in Hartford, and Bubba was like, you got to come here, F Paul, he, blah, blah, blah. And then driving home from an Indy, Paul called me and is like, I'm going to be on Raw tomorrow as the announcer. We're doing this thing. I'll let you know. But I think he thought I got buzzed while I was in the WWE locker room that he was going to be there. Hence why he called. And right then and there, I knew it was over. And then we seen him on TV, but there was still a lot of men and women that were still holding out because Paul was still, wearing he was still being Paul, but he was still also hitting us all up saying, we're going to do this. I'm still trying to get us on the networks, all this stuff, but it didn't happen. It's all good.
We heard about, the checks bouncing, and you don't know how prevalent it was. How prevalent was it with the checks bouncing?
Yeah, man, it just didn't happen.
I mean, was it every week? Was it every fourth check? Was it,
were you guys? No, it was all for, I remember Guido made friends. Guido and Devon made friends with the bank manager, and they would call us to tell us there was money in the account and go to
cash your check.
Guido's awesome. He's awesome.
Go to get your money because it'll run out soon. But I mean, there was a lot of people. It was kind of at times where there were just no checks. He would just make up an excuse that, they're not there. Listen, I forgave Paul for all that. And when we say, wrestling is real, when Vince McMahon reviewed Paul Heyman's performance on Monday Night Raw, because I had a lot of built up, pent up rage towards Paul. And Paul was just like, I did everything to keep it afloat, just like you would. And I lied to people I cared about, blah, 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 just like you would, Vince, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I get it. As well as, me running my own wrestling company and coming close and getting like good deals and, oh, this could happen if this happens and all these different things. And I did, I got it. And I could be bitter and angry, but I'm not going to be, because like I said, I have a great life. Fans, I'll live forever on social media via, Peacock. People tell me things I've done, how you affected others, but I've been living my dream since I'm 18 years old. I'm still living it. And it's cool. Like, I wouldn't be the man I was if I went to WCW, if I went to WWE, because people know me as, Tommy Dreamer from ECW. I'm on a #1 show on Sirius XM where we talk about wrestling, and I don't think I'd be that guy, because everybody that left ECW, I kind of outlasted them all. And it's your legacy, but it's also what makes me Tommy Dreamer.
Yeah, it says a lot about you. It says a lot about you personally. I mean, you're a very smart guy and you're very articulate, and you have ability to get over in different situations. And I think that's the appeal, not necessarily, what has happened. What has happened, certainly molds what we are today, but ability tends to rise. And I think that's what's happened with you.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I mean, I love helping out in Impact Wrestling. I've helped out in AEW. I love when I went back to WWE, feuding with the Wyatts. I don't like some of the behind the scenes stuff. Like, my best part about WWE, like besides the people, but my last run was everything they told me was 100% true. And there was no deviation. I got, to be back on television, tagging with Bubba, Devon, Rhino, working with the next generation with the Wyatts. My job was to come in, get this group over, and that was it. And if going in what it's not like, hey, you could be WWE champion if you keep on working hard. Because I was like, I always worked hard. So I love that. And, like I said, man, if I have $1 million in the bank, I want 2. I still make goals for myself. and I have ambition to do other things that in the wrestling business, where, hey, I want to make money. I want this company to make money. Use me just as much as I want to use you.
Tommy, one more question about ECW. I'm sorry, Jerry. One more question.
Go ahead. I want to hear it. Go ahead.
And when you found out that Vince was subsidizing Paulie, when did you find out? And was that a big deal to you guys? Because it was kind of like you against the world. As Paulie, kind of what I understand at least, was making ECW, which is one of the successes of ECW. How did that affect you guys when you guys found out? And when did you find out?
I found out. It was 100% confirmed to me when I'm working in WWE. Paul said it on Bite This, which was Dr. Tom's show, and he just admitted it. And I was just like, if you go back and if they could find it, I was just like, I can't believe this guy just said that. And I'm working in the office. We're getting ready for ECW One Night Stand 2005. And then JR has talked about it, that Paul would get a check or his company would get a check. But I was well in the office for WWE when I kind of found out. Shane had said, stuff. I'm good friends with Shane. But it was just, I don't think we'll ever get the truth. But I mean, JR has said he would cut Paul a check every week, So like I said, cool, great for Paul. Paul is great at what he does on the mic. He's a great storyteller, and I'm okay with it all. It's not that it's the business. Back then there was a lot of hatred / how could you do this? But I understood it now, and I'm okay with it.
Was there a lot of bitterness and hatred towards Paul at the end from the talent, because of the checks, and he was getting a check from WWE and Vince?
Well, we didn't know he was getting a check, but
you guys didn't know that. But you kind of said something was going on. I mean, with the way the business was rolling there. Did Paul have a lot of heat at the end of the run with ECW? Or did the guys really buy into Paul, where Paul was the disciple?
But he was now in WWE. So what could you do? And he's still telling certain people that, hey, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And heat is weird. There's people who, like we were talking before, there's people who say, I'm going to go kick his ass. And then people who actually go and kick his ass. So here's what I said. And I said it on Peacock. Everybody that was there chose to stay there. And some people, yes, just like myself, were owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I guess I chose to be there. And there was other people who had no other place to go. So you just kind of hope for the best. And I'll look in the mirror and say, God, I really need to lose weight. But then there's other people who'll be like, man, I got to get a new mirror. You don't want to take blame upon yourself. I'll view it as, if you watch a great detective movie where all these clues are in front of you, and then it's all revealed, or if your spouse has cheated on you, and then you're like, how did I not know? And then all these things come to fruition. You're like, yep, these are where it all happened. So, but like I said, it's all good. I love what I do. In the sense of dealing with younger talent, talking on Busted Open, having my own podcast. It's all because of my experiences because of ECW. And,
I mean, I want to ask you about Busted Open. I mean, you guys have hit the gold mine, which I could not be more happy for you guys. I understand partially why, you and Bubba, very smart guys, the business, Dave LaGreca, a guy who's very thoughtful and obviously a very smart guy who understands the business. But what is the success? Why are you guys so successful on Busted Open Radio, doing a show every day, which I find amazing? It's be hard for me to do a show every day. Me and Jerry love doing this, but this is once a week. But explain this? How do you define this? Not define. How do you explain the success of Busted Open?
If you look at social media, every day, something about wrestling is trending. You think of the world that we live in, and you could talk about wrestling Monday, Tuesday, Monday, you talk about what's going to be happen on Raw or what happened on the weekend. Tuesdays, we review Raw. Wednesdays, we review NXT. Thursdays, we review Dynamite. Fridays, we're talking about whatever, but then we're going to talk about SmackDown and Rampage, and then here comes Saturday. And wrestling fans want to armchair quarterback wrestling and where it goes. And the show is basically what, if you think about football, the popularity of football, it's an analyst for people who've played the game and a host. And we have the interaction with the nation. It's a beautiful relationship where, like today, when we're doing this podcast, Edge has just turned heel on AJ Styles, and it's nonstop where people want to talk about things. And then it'll carry over to what happens the next day on NXT, where you'll still have people talking about, or something that happens in the wrestling world, Cesaro getting let go. And then it's another topic where it's must talk radio, because fans have, as you guys know, wrestling fans are the most passionate fan base. And just like anything, day of football, they literally starts at like 8:00 in the morning, where they're talking. Then here comes the game. And then what do they do? Talk, hey, they just keep on talking about what happened. And as soon as those games are over, let's take a breath and we'll talk about next week. And in wrestling, there is no breath. It nonstop happens. And there's so many different wrestling companies, so much stuff to talk about, and wrestling fans can't get enough of it.
Yeah, and you look at what you mentioned with the NFL. That's such a great analogy, because I love football, and analysis now has gotten really, really good. You look at how guys used to analyze games; it was very superficial. Now you bring in guys who played quarterback, they always put at the bottom of it their why they are an expert. 4-time All-Pro, 2 Super Bowls, whatever it is, but they break down stuff in an analytic way that the only way you could possibly know that is to be a coach or a player of that game. And you guys are doing the same thing. You've got a couple of Hall of Famers here with Dave LaGreca, who's very knowledgeable himself, just as you do on the NFL channel. And to me, people expect more from what they're listening to. And I think maybe it's because there's so much out there. What you choose to listen to, people are very particular about what they want to.
Yes. You also look at the popularity of sports betting and how everyone's talking about it. If you think about it, you have all the stats, you have all this information, and information is key. I'm going to lay down my money because I know what's going to happen, and boom, my team loses. It's the same with pro wrestling. Everybody thinks they know what's going to happen, and then once they get swerved, how could they do it? And we're going to talk about it, and we're going to analyze it, and we're just going to keep on talking. And it's amazing how the show has grown, but it's also, we have been talking for almost 2 hours because we all love wrestling. And I just think that's what comes down to it. And, between the two of you, you have enough experience that we're talking to for 2 hours, all about stuff that we love. To me, it's a beautiful thing.
You've got your pulse on a lot of what's going on right now, Tommy, probably as much as anybody, you and Bubba both, because that's what you do daily. What do you see wrestling going forward in the next, say, couple years, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever time frame you choose?
The business has changed within the last 3 years so much. We're talking about, if this was, I feel, 5 years ago, there would be a massive Russian heel coming out of it.
I'm still waiting on one. I may dust off my boots just in case they need one.
It's not going to happen, because you have to be smarter. You look at, like I said, that you just have to go different ways to think about it. Everyone talks about MJF, how he's the smartest heel in the business. Cool, because he doesn't have those parameters. But you look at the money, or everyone wants to crap all over the WWE. Look at the money that WWE is doing, their business, and the excitement going into WrestleMania. AEW helped change the landscape. I think the business would have. It's hard to judge because of COVID, but you look at, hey, AEW outdrew WWE in this marketplace. you just got to see how the tide. AEW has definitely changed it, but COVID had changed it. So you just have to see. When I was pre-COVID, it was open, man. And my company was, I mean, I'm doing great running my own wrestling company, all these things. And even though everybody's getting signed, there's new talent to be out there. Now it's more of a, I guess, a seller's market because there's so much talent available. But once that talent goes to an AEW, the door is going to be wide open. And you just saw where everyone's still speculating about Cody. Where's Cody going to, show up? For what, 7 years we were talking about CM Punk, and when CM Punk finally shows, cool, we have these amazing moments. But I mean, for it to be covered on Sports Center, TMZ, it's just amazing how the business has come. Once this pandemic is totally over, I think you'll have the greatest who's a draw, how we're drawing, what's going to happen. Is wrestling still going to be super duper cool? You have New Japan involved in a lot of this. So there's a lot of ramifications coming up. And I just see it more, if you think of announcers, you got to call it more like it's real. A great team like a Bobby Heenan with one-liners, or even Jerry Lawler, it's not going to get over anymore. But if you have the one person who does it and does it well, that person would get over. It would add to a broadcast. But it has a more realistic form to it. But to answer your question, it's hard because we're still in the world of COVID. But
yeah, and the biggest question there is who's a draw. How would you like to be champion during COVID? I mean, it's about ratings, but how do you measure ratings? Because you're not measuring it to the 1919 Spanish flu, which is the last pandemic in the country. You can't measure that. So how do you measure a champion's worth? I mean, it's the worst thing in the world. You're out there in front of no people at one point, and you don't know who's going to be a draw until you get in front of those crowds every single week. And all of a sudden, you're going to have people surprise you, I think. You're going to have people, I think, disappoint you, I would think, as well. You're going to realize so much more about the business. I think you're right. Once we're done with this pandemic, it's going to be a true golden era of professional wrestling.
To talk about Keith Lee. Keith Lee's debut on AEW was perfect, because if I'm watching that as a WWE person, I say, how did I let that person go? Because these people are beyond going crazy for him. And what could he have been in my system? And then I look at it from another point of view, like Drew McIntyre's reign was completely with no fans. Could you imagine the business that Drew McIntyre would have done in the UK alone for the WWE?
That's right. Yeah.
Or Bobby Lashley at a live event. I like to go to, you always buy something at a live event because, hey, I was there. Where are these t-shirt sales? If I'm sitting at home and watching a bunch of wrestlers happen, I'm not going to go to my internet and buy a t-shirt because I'm home. But you were part of the Attitude Era where everybody had merch, everybody had a sign. I think the business is on an uptick, but we just got to see, like you said, how do you know what's a draw? How do you go about because it used to be asses in seats and merch and ratings. How do we tell that for now? And it's hard.
Yeah, it was very easy then because you had a daily test case. It wasn't like Walking Dead where you do a whole season of 13 shows and it's the third show. If something isn't working, you can't change it. With wrestling, because you do live events every single week, from 1 week to the next, is something getting over, is something not getting over, how much is it getting over? And that's what was missed during COVID. Tell us about, Tommy, about what you're doing now with your wrestling company.
I'm not doing anything with it.
Great, thanks. That question was perfect.
Great question, John.
Thanks, Tommy. Great to see you, Tommy.
I don't want to say my heart got taken out of it. I know what it costs. There, as you run a wrestling company, there's a lot of heartache, and man, you come so close to making it. I was the first company to get paid for by Twitch, and it was a good deal. And then just things. It is what it is, man. I'm okay with it. I don't know I will tell you that when you talk about the future of the business, we're kind of in it, but I think it's going to be more in the sense of it's not going to just be about television. Every streaming service and every platform of how you're getting your content out there is going to be key for your financial success. You know, you look at social media engagements, how much money you're making from this and able to capitalize on tweets. I mean, when you have those views, when you click on JBL calling out Kevin Owens, there's a little advertisement right before that. And if JBL's, you look how many, you have your analytical data right there to say, hey, wait, we're on to something. JBL, you better start doing some push-ups because I'm going to book Kevin Owens.
He needs more than that.
I better find out what Bubba's on.
But what I'm saying is you have your research right. You could literally go to your phone and see how that tweet did. And if you know how to capitalize financially on your page, you get paid for that. And that's just like this podcast, just like anything, YouTube, all these different streams.
You get paid for these podcasts?
Oh, I was about to say, don't tell Mr. Brisco that. Okay?
Oh.
No.
He's on the ECW plan?
Yeah. We don't know, ignore that.
I work for the Paul Heyman of podcast.
That's right. I keep promising Mr. Brisco all kinds of things. I'll send you a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Give him some beer, he'll be good. But I think that's the future of the industry too, just different streaming platforms and how you make more of your money, because it's not, you know, even I feel Nielsen is an outdated system for ratings, and that'll go away. There'll be more data, like impressions, like I said, your tweet, we could see how many views you get. You could see who it goes to. There's going to be more DVR ratings, because who really watches live television? We DVR everything. So I think that's the future of the industry, how you get all these other things. Like I'll look at AEW, they're putting out a lot of content. Why? They'll probably have their own library, you know, their own, you know, AEW network. I know Impact, and I know their numbers of how many subscribers they have there to the Impact Plus and how it keeps on growing. And it's just an amazing structure, because once you have this thing called content, I could do something with it.
Yeah, it's the old mantra: content is king.
Yep.
Tommy, you know, we're talking about the future and everything. Well, let's take a long ride back. You've had a legendary career in a major organization, ECW, major organization. I don't care what anybody said. They were major. They were talk of the entire country and entire wrestling world at one time. WWF. What is your most memorable moment in the two, and where did it come? I mean,
it's different, as you know, different stages in your life. I would say Rob Van Dam and myself at Madison Square Garden, we main evented the Garden that night. We were the last match of the night. And my father, he was going blind. He had glaucoma, and he had a last-ditch effort surgery to save his vision. And he actually, for 3 weeks of his life, had 20/20 vision. And he got to see his son wrestle at Madison Square Garden against Rob Van Dam, and he had perfect vision. And then literally within, I think, 5 days after that, he got streptococcus in his eye, strep in his eye, and he went completely blind in the one eye and had 10% vision in his other eye. And he had Parkinson's disease. His last few years of his life were really, really rough. But my dad supported me my entire career, and he got to see his son main event Madison Square Garden, where we saw hockey games together, where we saw Jimmy Snuka jump off the top of the cage. And that's a great defining moment for me. And I remember I cried, and Stephanie was just like, "You okay?" And I was just sitting I like to soak in all these moments, because it's all very, very real for me. And Stephanie's like, "You okay?" I was like, "Yeah." And I told her, and she's like, "You'll get more moments." And my favorite part about it, Vince then walks by. He's like, "Did you get hurt?" And I was like, "No, just emotional about everything." And he looked at me like, "Are you crying?" And it was just the hugging compassion of Stephanie, and then Vince was like, "Wait, you're not hurt, so why are you upset?"
I guarantee you, if you would have told Vince as your dad's, if you'd told Vince that story, he'd been right there crying with you.
You're right, he would have, because that's a soft spot to Vince, his family like that.
Listen, I think all of us here, Vince gets an entirely terrible rap. I think we did on Busted Open, told Vince McMahon stories, and he doesn't like hearing the good that he's done. He's done great. I've had nothing but pleasurable experiences with Vince. I really do. And even, another moment is when I won the ECW title in WWE ECW. It was
made you the only guy that had those titles, right?
Yep. But for me, it was like I went to Vince. I was losing all the time, and I was just like, Vince, just listen, man. My contract's really up. If you don't believe in me, cool. Then just fire. Like it'll be my last match, and if not, let me run with it. And he gave me that opportunity. That night, we're in New Orleans. There was as many signs for me that night as for John Cena, and I was just like, it was a great night, and we live for those moments. And I just talked to Terry Funk, and I'll tell you something that he said. I talked to him about. I said, "Hey, I watched you and Junior versus Brody and Hanson," and I was like, "God, the people loved you." And he was just like, "We were the first Americans to turn baby face." And I was just like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, we dropped a bomb on Japan, and all the Americans were heels, and then they just got over on for us." And I was like, "Do you realize that like wrestling changed how people feel about other people, but like on a worldwide level, not just in a wrestling world?" And he just paused and he goes, "We really did something, didn't we?" And I said, "Yes, you did, Terry." And he's like, "Huh." And I was just like, that's so, you think about that, or you think about just what happened in Saudi Arabia with Lita and Becky Lynch on a billboard. Wrestling has changed how people think in the world, and that's why I love to live in my crazy pro wrestling world, because the ramifications are much bigger than most people will ever know.
It's
We
real
love
life,
living in it with you.
Yeah. You
Well,
made
Tommy,
it a better world to live in, Tommy. John, I
Thank
got
you.
to say that 12 years ago, I had started my first of my 4 strokes. I'm laying in a hospital bed. I hadn't got very many calls at all. I won't say I didn't get any calls, but I ain't got very many calls at all. Phone rings and a hospital phone rings. I pick it up and it's Tommy Dreamer on the other line. "Hey man, I heard you're in the hospital. I just want to call and wish you well, man." Wow, what a feeling. Thank you.
Thank you,
that's
man.
awesome. Tommy, I'll tell you a heart wrenching story. I called his wife and I said, "How's Mr. Briscoe doing?" And she said, "Oh, John," said, "he's slurring his words. It's bad." I said, "Barb, that's Friday."
Yeah, my wife got it from him and Bruce and JR. Everybody called it. That's just a normal day for him. He don't know where he's at. He's slurring his words. He's slobbering all over the place. "Oh, what's different? What's wrong with you?"
That's awesome. Yeah, just before you go, and this is brotherly. Scott Steiner had a medical episode in Impact right before the pandemic. He had I guess he had a heart attack, and I'm working on him with medics, and they said he wouldn't be here if he wasn't at a wrestling show because they had the paddles. His heart went into defib, and I'm in the hospital waiting, and I see his wife, and here comes Rick, and the doctor comes there, and I watched Scott drop, and I'm telling the story, and they're like, "Okay, well, how long was he unconscious?" And I was like, "No, we were working on him, pounding his heart. The medic was working on it." And the doc's like, "Well, we have to worry about, loss of oxygen to the brain, if he could be brain damaged." And Rick chimes in and he goes, "My brother's been brain damaged his whole life." This is while Scott is still in like intensive care. And I
Brotherly
was
love.
just like, this is the best. So that's the same story that you two guys just shared. Really brothers.
So that's what happened to Lawler, huh?
Yeah, that's what happened to King.
Well, Tommy, we can't thank you enough, man, for taking this time out of your schedule today. And I know we're busted open, man. You're hitting it hard, man. But we really appreciate it. And the listeners out here, they're going to enjoy these stories, man. They're genuine stories, and thank you for being a part of pro wrestling, sports entertainment, however you want to call it, man.
I love seeing both of you, man. It really made my day. And we talked for 2 hours here. I hope this is a two-parter. But I do. The hardest part about the wrestling business, I literally saw you guys for 4 days a week, and then when you don't see each other, time goes by. We're used to it, but we are the wrestling business. We're a family, but we're a dysfunctional family. But I'm happy I got to spend the day with my brothers again. So thank you.
Yeah, we're definitely dysfunctional, but Tommy, we love each other and we love you, and we can't thank you enough for coming on us. And we're so happy for your success with Busted Open, with Impact, with everything you're doing. Tommy, we're your biggest fans. We're your brothers, and thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, bro.